Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We have with us today Felicia, and we are happy that she's here.
Hello.
And I like to start all of my interviews by asking the simple question. Well, I guess it's not a question, it's a directive. Tell me about yourself. Tell me everything about yourself.
Okay. I am a retired scientist, but I have been writing for longer than I want to admit. I think I'm a born storyteller, and as soon as they put a pencil in my hand, I always say I started writing poems, little stories, and I always wanted to be a published author. I thought, okay, I'll do this science thing for a little bit, and then someday, my books will make it, and it's really hard. But eventually in 2011, I got my first book published, and then 3 more after that. And so this is my 5th book that I have gotten published, and it is truly what I love doing. I love writing. I love telling stories.
So let's dissect that a little bit here. You said that it's been very difficult to get published. So usually I talk about the publishing journey a little bit later in the interview, but let's actually start with that since you brought it up. So tell me what your experience has been like.
Okay, well, the ironic thing about We Have Met Where No One Will See is it is the first book I ever completed, as it were. And I started querying it back in the 90s. And this is back when you had to buy books to find, the names of agents, and you had to print everything out, and you had to mail them off. And it was a very slow, laborious process that ended in me not getting anywhere with this book. And I had a really good critique group. We were online, which was really new back then. I found them through Usenet, believe it or not. And we would read each other's books, and they were really good telling me what didn't work about the book. And one of the best writers in the group said something to me that was very hard to hear, but I needed to hear it. And she said, "You may not be a good enough writer yet to tell the story you want to tell here." And it was like, but so I set it aside and I started writing other things. I wrote a romance. I did a little dabbling in sci-fi. And then in 2011, I finally got the romance picked up. And then I turned back to my sci-fi stories. I rewrote those, found a publisher for that, and that trilogy was published with my current publisher, DX Varos. And when I was done that, when I put that series to bed, I thought, I want to go back to that first novel. That was my first love, and dig it out and see if I'm finally a good enough writer to write the story I want to write. And I really tore my baby apart. I changed this. It was originally set in New York, and I thought, why did I set it in New York? I live near Philadelphia, so I changed the setting. I changed a lot of the characters. One of the criticisms I got a lot was I had too many flashbacks. So actually, this is more like a prequel. That's how I ended up dealing with those flashbacks. Is I wrote that story instead.
Okay. So let's actually talk about your sci-fi, because I'm a sci-fi aficionado. Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, sure. Okay, I have a series. It's called the Lovelace series because the spaceship it's set on is the Lovelace, and it's named after Ada Lovelace, who's one of my heroes. And it features a Native American hero, also a woman, Nietzsche Decker, and it's about, the crux of it is that humanity has not met aliens. We've gone out into the stars, we've colonized some planets near Alpha Centauri, but we haven't met aliens. And when we finally do, they attack us. And we're racing to find out, like, why are they so hostile towards us? What's going on? And we find out that they were originally humans. So like the whole story is we're our own worst enemies, the humans, and that's why it's we have met the enemy. We have met the enemy, and the enemy is us. And then the next book is about. It's really kind of a self-contained, almost bottle episodes about a space anomaly where Nietzsche and a guy she doesn't like very much gets trapped, and they have to work together to get their way out. And then it's a lot about her character growth. She starts out, a lot of people found her problematic, and I expected them to. She's like an angry, very little self-control woman. But through the 3 books, I wanted to bring her to a mature person who dealt with her past, who dealt with, she has a lot of father issues, dealt with her father. And I think in that 3rd book, we start to see, because I bring in a younger person who is the annoying, uncontrolled, and she has to mentor this person and bring them along. So in the 3 books, I tried to really bring this character through this enormous character growth arc, where we take her from this uncontrolled, angry young woman to this mature, competent officer who now can mentor other people.
So one thing I keep hearing you talk a lot about is your character and character growth. And so I had a conversation with actually a couple earlier today, and they write fantasy, and we were talking about world building versus characterization. So it seems like you like to center your writing around a character as opposed to a universe that you are building out. Is that fair to say?
That is very fair to say. My stories are very character-driven. And that's, I think, why I write in different genres, because my characters come to me first, before anything else. I hear them talking in my head.
Might want to get that checked out.
Who is this person talking to? It's too late. And I start asking, like, who is this person? What do they want? And then, so I have this character, like, Lucia came to me, just kind of a stick figure, and I had to flesh her out. And the same thing with Nietzsche. And I'm start thinking, who are they? What do they want? What are they looking for? And then I decide what setting is the best to tell that story. And that's why I've written romance, and I've written sci-fi, and then I've written mystery, because it's about the character and what's the best way to tell their story.
That's cool. I like how you have a bunch of different genres under your belt. A lot of people just stick with one genre that seems to work with them, but maybe you haven't. I'm speaking to the people here who haven't tried a bunch of genres. Maybe you haven't found your voice until you've tried a bunch of genres. So I would encourage people to do that. Talking again about the sci-fi specifically, would you say that it's more of a traditional sci-fi, or is it more of like a space opera?
Oh, it is space. It's pure old-fashioned space opera. A lot of people, I called it Roddenberry-esque, and I thought that was a big compliment, because I am a Star Trek fan from like way back, and I thought, I don't know if that was meant to be a compliment or not, but I took it that way. And, it really is the old, the spacefarers out there facing the unknown. And those were the stories I loved as a child. And I go back to those. And it's definitely the
Awesome. Yeah, I have a soft spot in my heart for that as well. In my own querying process, I've realized that there is a difference between sci-fi and space opera. And I didn't really quite know that when I first started querying. And then people are like, well, we're not really looking for this. We're looking for like the Martian-esque things, not really like Star Wars-esque. So you had to find the correct agents that are looking for those specific things.
Right. Yeah.
Again, on the topic of sci-fi, have you been following the disclosure with the UAP that's been going on recently with the U.S. government?
Oh, yeah, yes,
okay.
Of course.
Good,
I am intrigued but skeptical.
I think we all are. And I mean, I think we all know in the back of our heads, like, okay, the government's probably up to something a little shisty, and there's probably life out there. And we haven't necessarily had proof until now, but I feel like it's the beginning of something big that at least people are starting to step forward and talk a little bit about it. And I'm curious, what do you think, and this is all speculation, of course, but how do you think that science fiction as a genre would be affected by an actual discovery of alien life?
I think it would be a big boost. It's not like, uh-oh, we got it all wrong because, hey, so many books set in the future that have already come and gone, got it all wrong, and we keep, reading those because it's cool. It's good storytelling, and I think it would be a great boost for the field. And whatever kind of alien life we might find, whether it be intelligent or just like, something, much more primitive, it would ignite, people like us who like to read it, who like to write it. I think it would ignite a lot of interest in it. It would be really
that's
cool.
the reason.
I mean, even as a scientist, I'm just like, wow, it opens up like a whole new branch. I had to invent for my book some like astrogenetics. That doesn't exist, but now it would.
So yeah, tell me, what was the actual branch of science that you studied?
I am a molecular biologist.
So in your sci-fi then, do you have what might be considered evolutionarily accurate aliens, or how does that work? I know you mentioned that they're humans from the future, but what else do you have in there?
I actually try to make them not too humanoid. So more like I had some that were avian. I have some that are like dust particles. So I'm more looking for like, why is everything we meet so humanoid? And some of these ones that are like, what did Nietzsche describe them as? Like shark squids, sapient trees, things like that. So when I'm making my aliens, I even think, if you follow along with all the discoveries we've made in the deep sea, because I wanted to be a marine biologist. I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau, but I ended up being a molecular biologist. So we have such cool things, unworldly things down there. And then, it's like you look at sci-fi and some of our aliens aren't even as interesting as the stuff we're finding, in the deep vents. So when I try to create my aliens, I think like, okay, I either invent an alien because it's interesting and think, okay, what kind of environment would lead to something like that evolving? Or I look at the environment and say, okay, what would evolve in that environment? And so that at least it makes sense. Like at one point I had to make this kind of murderous night lizard. And I thought, okay, they have these huge jaws. Why? Okay, they need to hunt this thing. So there's some things in my writing that I use my background to, so it'll make sense.
So you combine your background with world building in a certain sense. I like that. Okay.
Yes, I do.
Well, thank you for indulging me while we talked about your sci-fi, but I think you're really here to talk about this other book that you've written called Where No One Will See.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about this one.
Yes. Okay, the main character is a Philadelphia private eye, Lucia Scaffetti, and she is from a notorious mafioso family, and she spent her entire life trying to escape that world. And those efforts are thwarted when her hitman father suddenly disappears. He was in search of this priceless diamond he stole from his last victim. And she needs to unravel this mystery. So she races to find what happened to him. And she's going up against a very powerful and crooked Philadelphia cop. And she has very few allies. And she's trying to resist the help her family has to offer. And it looks like she's finally going to have to decide what side of the law does she really belong on, knowing that the wrong choice could land her in prison or an early grave.
Okay, nice. Is that your elevator pitch, or is that actually on the back of the book?
That's a little bit of my elevator pitch that ended up on the back of my book.
Okay. So how did you come up with the inspiration for this novel?
I think it was, my mom was a great reader, and she had all these Perry Mason novels. A lot of people don't know that he was a series of novels before he was a TV series. And Ellery Queen, and I just grew up loving the hard-boiled detective stories. And I wanted to set but of course they were also male-centered, and I wanted to see a woman in that setting. And I'm a Italian American, so of course making her Italian American seemed like the natural thing to do. And the mafioso angle, one thing that bothers me sometimes about stories that involve the mafia, like The Sopranos and even a little bit The Godfather, is they romanticize it. They have the character, like the reader, start rooting for them. And my family, I'll admit, was touched very, like I didn't have anyone in that, but I knew people. Well, my parents knew people. And there's nothing romantic about it. It is a brutal, terrible way of life. And I thought, if I'm going to involve the mafia, I want to make it clear. They're terrible people. And anything, getting involved with them is always a mistake. So I was like, I don't want anyone reading my book and thinking, oh,
Well, this is going on the internet, so hopefully they don't come after you for saying that.
Yeah, I hope not.
It's interesting the experiences you're talking about, because I'm half Italian, so my mother is full Italian and her parents are both full Italian. They actually grew up in Philadelphia also. And so I think my grandfather, again, I don't think he was involved in any of that, but I think he started to get the feeling that things were getting too close, so he moved everybody out to the West Coast. But it's interesting how perhaps our families have similar stories in that regard.
Right. Well, I mean, the one thing my grandfather came over from Italy, and I'm only half too. That's where the Watson is. That's my dad's side. And he said, they had a hard time, as you probably know, finding work back then. Italians were discriminated against, and that was one of the things that was open to them, the mananè, black hands. But he realized that once you do that, first of all, you're in it forever. And second of all, anything they tell you, he even said to me once, if they tell you to kill your brother, you have to kill your brother. And it's kind of like that has stuck with me my entire life, that is how brutal that life is. So, and that's kind of what I wanted to portray in the book, how brutal that life can be.
So let's talk a little bit about your writing habits. What is it like to be a writer for years and years and years? Because you said you've been writing longer than you want to, or something like that. You've been writing too long.
I want to admit that how long it took me to get published. I wrote a lot of fan fiction as a way to keep busy in the years that I couldn't get published, and that's a good way to hone your craft. I tell that to young writers all the time. I'm sure you're on Reddit, and I'm on the writing groups, and a lot of people are like, where can I post my stuff? Where can I get feedback? And it was a good place to cut my teeth, because I'll tell you, you want to develop a thick skin, put your fan fiction on the internet, and you'll either stop posting it or you'll develop a thick skin. And I did, and it's a good way to experiment at very low cost. You can experiment with different genres, you can experiment with different styles, first person, third person, omniscient, everything, and like I said, in between rejection letters, it gives you something to do.
So would you say that posting your work on online forums has been overall productive, or is it mostly trolls looking to knock your ego down a notch?
I would say there was always the trolls, but I think it was very productive, because there's also people who are, depending upon the fandoms, and I wrote in a lot of fandoms. Of course, Star Trek, you probably guessed that. Star Wars. My God, X-Files. I can't even think of all of the ones that I wrote in. And they're very invested in the story. And you get reams of feedback that, some people now have to pay for. They'll, go and pay for it. And there's willing beta readers, and there's a lot of good, hard, practical stuff you used to learn. I mean, I haven't posted in years. I don't know if it seems to have changed a little bit. Like a lot on AO3, Archive of Our Own, is where it looks like people don't give as detailed feedback as they used to. I used to post on Usenet, of course, and then LiveJournal, and people would write paragraphs and this is on one chapter of feedback. And it was really good because it's so immediate. You know, when you write a book, you put it out there and you wait for someone to maybe write 3 lines about the whole book. And back then, I would get immediate feedback that night about the chapter I posted, like what worked, what didn't work, what people liked, what engaged them. It was very useful to me in my journey.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point about how the internet interacts, or rather leads our interactions with each other and with novels. So before the internet, and I'm sure you know this a little bit better than I do, it was harder to get your hands on books. But now there's millions of
Right.
authors out there publishing millions of books every year, and so there's a surplus of people screaming, hey, pay attention to me, look at my stuff. And then you go to these websites, and all the authors on there want attention for their book, and they want you to write paragraphs about their book and only want to write 3 sentences about your book. So it's
Right.
people have to learn to do a little bit of give and take. And actually, I did like a novel swap with someone on Reddit a while back, and we like gave detailed feedback on each other's novels. But it was time consuming to do that, and they did a good job, and I'd hope that I did a good job for them. But it's not as simple as, here, everybody read my book and give me something for free, because there's people that are paid to do that.
Yeah, they are. I mean, good editing it's worth what you pay for it, and good feedback and honest feedback, and that's what another writer can really give you. You know, sometimes it seems to me that young people are just looking for validation, and if I'm wrong, okay, call me out on it, young people.
I mean, you
but,
might be
you
right.
know,
I want to know that what I've written is good. I mean, I think it's good. Like,
Good,
my shit
good.
don't stink, so.
We all think it's good, of course, but you know, some of the most. I have to say, my publisher is a fantastic editor, and when I first, you know, I had already gone through 3 really good, I think, beta readers by the time he got a hold of Where No One Will See, and you know, but he went in there and he would be like, "Hey, this part doesn't work for me. You know, you're showing, not telling. You're telling, not showing here, and you know, this is a plot hole." And you know, when you first get those read, it's like, oh, I thought it was great. But then you go in and you fix that and you read it and you're like, hey, it's better now. So yeah, you know, that honest, intelligent feedback is invaluable.
And you've mentioned your publisher a couple times. Did you forego the agent process, or did you go straight to a publisher?
Yeah, he takes direct submissions. And that's how my last publisher and this one, that's how they worked. I've had it seemed like there were a couple times in my career when I was very close. You know, agents had my entire manuscript for a long time, and I even got a couple of revise and resubmit, but I never landed an agent. So this way has worked well.
Have you ever done any self-publishing or all traditional?
I have not. I'm indie publishers, or they're actually called small press. Small press publishing is how I've done all.
Yeah, you know,
I mean,
ahead.
I was going to say, God bless the self-publishers, because I don't think, when I see people dismissing self-published stuff, I think, oh my God, do you know what these people did? You know, they had to, you know, get an editor. They had to, you know, get a cover. They had to, formatting alone, it's so much work. It's
Yeah, I've
quite
talked
an
with a
endeavor.
number of both traditionally published and self-published authors while doing this. And self-publishing is like a whole business, all wrapped up in one. And you have to be not only a good author, but you have to have an entrepreneurial mindset and figure out how to project manage, and you got to have thick skin for sure. So
You do. And you have to know how to market yourself. And that is a completely different skill
yeah,
in writing.
absolutely.
So.
Well, I'd like to invite you to read an excerpt from one of your books if you'd like.
I would love to. I'm going to read, this is Where No One Will See. It was a rather dull surprise for Lucia when the next day Detective Pike called her down to PPD headquarters to make a statement about the death of Paul Leguano, found in his car, killed by a bullet to the left eye. She told Colonia and Pike what she knew about the murder, which was nothing, except it was further proof that Carlo Schiavetti was still alive. She learned nothing new during the interrogation except that both murderers had employed the same weapon and surmised that her father had somewhere picked up a Sig Sauer P226. Upon leaving the police station, she noticed a black BMW E38. It was a distinctive car, especially in that neighborhood. She went over to the driver's side and tapped on the tinted glass window. When it slid down slightly, she leaned in. "Hey there, looking for me?" Her cousin Mickey eyed her impassively. "Yes, as a matter of fact, I am. Please get in." She wanted to refuse, but knew Dominic Viteri was a dangerous man, one only an idiot would trifle with. She wasn't feeling particularly idiotic that morning, so slipped into the passenger seat, saying, "Good to see you, Mick. I wish I could say the same." "You could if you lied like I just did." Okay, maybe she was feeling a little bit idiotic, but Mickey's pomposity was too tempting a target. "You're making jokes? K-cause." He moved into her personal space, growling, "Don't you realize you are in big trouble?" Lucia didn't respond, but started scanning the area to see if there were other cars of a suspicious nature in evidence. Mickey took that as a sign to continue. "You know, if you had just stopped at Frankie, we could have looked the other way. That Gavone was dragging the organization down, and my Gabriella is better off without him, which she will see in time. But Polly," he shook his head, continuing, "he was a good soldier, and D'Amico is not going to let this go." "D'Amico thinks I killed Frankie and Lugano? Yeah, he does. I'm warning you, do not try and play Salvatore D'Amico for a fool." While Lucia was fighting the urge to roll her eyes at him, Mickey continued, "Because you're family, I might be able to make a bargain with him and get you out of this. I need you to give him something, though, so you have to hand over the diamond and coins to me, right?" She couldn't suppress a snort of laughter, causing Mickey to snap. "You still think this is funny?" "I shouldn't, but I do. I do think it's funny how you all got your tongues hanging out for those damn things that are probably in some European collector's vault. And that my old man has you all chasing your tails like this. He's outsmarted everybody, is probably having a good laugh about me taking the heat for it." "Lucia, your father is dead." "No, he's not. The proof is staring everyone in the face. He's killing everyone they send for him." Mickey gripped the steering wheel and threw his head back against the seat. He whispered to himself, "Manadada, Patsy was telling the truth." He looked back at her and spoke very deliberately. "I know you don't like me. I know you don't trust me. But I think you know I am not a stupid man. You can believe me on this. Carlo Schiavetti is dead. Ah, capite?"
Everybody behind me loved that, by the way. They're all back there, trust me. Well, thank you for sharing that. I really liked your dialogue. It was very clean cut, and I knew exactly what everyone was saying. It wasn't too flowery, which is something that I struggle with in my own writing. So,
That's one of my few gifts is dialogue. My description is where I really struggle, but my characters speak to me, so I always hear them very clearly, but fleshing it out, what they're doing...
Again, they have medicine
that's
for
really
that,
hard
so.
for me.
All right, well, before I let you go, my final question... Actually, we have two questions.
Okay.
What messages are you trying to give to your readers? And we kind of briefly touched on this when you were talking about your sci-fi. And how your character arc and how she grows. But are you trying to give a lot of messages, or is this strictly entertainment for you?
I always have a message for me, a theme that I'm working on. It keeps me focused during writing the novel, so that I don't stray. And with this one, a lot is about the tough decisions we have to make. That decision she has to make, like, am I one of the good guys, or am I one of the not so good? That character defining moment. The one thing that I love to indulge in, I'll put it that way, in all my books, is that wham scene or that wham moment when one thing a character says or does completely changes the way the reader looks at them. And so a lot of this book is about Lucia and who is she? Is she really a good person, or has that, being brought up in that mafia family, has it tainted her in a way that she'll never get away from, I should say.
Awesome. All right. Well, Felicia, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mom.